The Car Chaser, a Burson family narrative told by Alexis McCammon. Boy and Brownie were brother and sister. They were two of a litter of 5 dachshunds. These 5 little puppies were left orphans when their mother met with a fatal accident. She was hit by a car when the puppies were only 6 days old. Mrs. Burson, my grandmother, became their substitute mother, bottle feeding them through their infancy. She fed them baby formula and vitamins and got up in the night when they would cry for hunger. Her daughter, Carolyn, sometimes helped feed the puppies, but never in the night. The puppies were well cared for and even went on vacation with the family when they were too young and weak to crawl out of their box. Mrs. Burson substitute mothered them until they were 6 weeks old, when homes were found for 3 of the 5. The Burson family decided to keep the remaining 2, Brownie and Boy. These 2 pups grew up in an enclosed yard. Chain link fence wrapped all 4 sides. Soon, the Bursons, along with their pups, moved from the city to a small town where they had no fence. Brownie stayed near the house, but Boy, an adventurer and somewhat daredevil, did dangerous things, like chase cars. In their new town, Carolyn was a part of a Girl Scout troop. Her leader, Mrs. Green, suggested, "Girls, let's have a Mother's Day tea to honor your moms, so faithful to take you to these meetings." Carolyn volunteered, "My mom will make the cake," and asked her grandma if they could have the party in the restaurant room, which grandma owned. The troop became very ambitious and invited several other troops to come and bring their moms. With so many guests, the cake Miss Burson was volunteered to make would need to be quite big. Mrs. Burson, a great substitute and real mom, agreed to make and decorate 2 large sheet cakes. Carolyn helped her mother mix the icing. She scooped some of the mixture in 2 small bowls and added red and green food coloring, stirring and testing until they were just the right shades, a lovely bright pink and leaf green. Mrs. Green picked up the girls early and drove them to the restaurant so they could decorate the room with crepe paper and streamers. Balloons floated and danced at the door. The girls looped ribbon all around the tables. The effect was quite festive. The girls chattered with excitement, expecting that this would be a wonderful tea that the moms would never forget, especially some of them. At home, Mrs. Burson delicately placed the 2 large sheet cakes on the back seat of her car. She started the engine and slowly backed out of the driveway, careful to not disturb the cakes. Halfway to the corner, Mrs. Burson glanced in the rearview mirror, and Boy was running, leaping behind the car. "I'll have to be very careful getting the cakes out of the car," she thought. In 5 minutes, she was soon pulling into the parking lot of the restaurant, filled with cars of the mothers waiting to be celebrated. She opened the car door and got out as quickly as she could, but not quickly enough. Like a flash, Boy leapt into the front seat and over into the back. He landed in the middle of one of the beautifully decorated cakes. Not knowing what he got himself into, he was stunned and stood perfectly still. Mrs. Burson grabbed him and flung him on his sugary sweet paws to the pavement. She carried the one perfect cake inside as music seeped from the doorway to let her know the party had begun. "Start serving from this cake. I had a little accident with the other one. I'll be right back," she explained. At home, Mrs. Burson did all she could do. 4 perfect little paw prints sunk straight through the lovely white icing. Luckily, none of the pink roses or green leaves were disturbed. Carefully, she cut out 4 round circles containing the paw prints. She then filled the round holes with leftover icing and smoothed until the white was perfectly flesh. Mrs. Burson took the cake back to the restaurant, ensuring that, as she backed out, Boy was inside the house. Some people got very sweet pieces of cake that day, mostly all icing. No one complained. Actually, Carolyn got one of those pieces. She knew better than to question it. Knowing Boy, she had a pretty good idea what had happened.